How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, I guess. I need to constantly discipline myself to make sure that I get up and walk around because with Zoom, especially this job, we spend a lot of time sitting on chairs, and
Yeah?
it's not healthy.
No, I guess not.
You know. But
Um,
otherwise, I'm well. Hunkering down here in Richmond. You're from New Westminster, right?
yeah, our newspaper is from New Westminster. I live in Coquitlam.
Oh, you're from Coquitlam. Oh, okay,
Yeah, I used to live in New Westminster.
I see.
Um, okay, so I guess we should just get started with the first question. How did you get
Sure.
involved?
Before you go though, your friend's Ollie is joining us, or
No, he unfortunately couldn't make it today.
okay, that's
He
fine.
he had
So it's
homework.
just you and I.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go.
So how did you get involved with politics?
How did I get involved with politics? Um, when I was an international student in Canada, I guess it all started with my background. My generations and people like us were born in Hong Kong. Back then, it was a British Crown colony. Um, as a colony member, the Brits back then they would give us travel document, but not a passport with the rights to abroad in the UK. And as a colony, you don't have much rights in terms of political rights.
Hmm.
I was when I was studying in Canada, I was fascinated with how Canadians govern themselves, um, and I learned a lot through the the national news broadcasts every night. I start paying more and more attention to how Canadians govern themselves through their political system. Um, that continued until I graduated from the University of Saskatchewan in 1987. 1989, you probably were not born yet.
No.
Um, it was another one of those uh, tumultuous time. It was a you can actually see the history page turn. Um, in 1989, new generations of Chinese leaders were um, governing China. They're still, dictatorial to be sure. Hong Kong was about to return to China because the Sino-British Joint Declaration was signed, um, planning to have a return of Hong Kong in 1997. But in 1989, the pro-reform um, Chinese leader Hu Yaobang, died, and that triggered students mourning him, uh, students requesting and asking for more um, reform, opening up of the countries, accountability for corruptions, and all that. At the same time, the Soviet bloc was the bloc itself was deteriorating, falling apart. What happened in Tiananmen Square in June 4th, 1989, had actually been in as a result was the last straw on the camel's back for East Germany. The guards were ordered to fire on the people who wanted to cross the Berlin Wall, but seeing what happened in Beijing, um, many of the officers were afraid. So they let the people go through the Berlin Wall to West Berlin. and that triggers the downfall of East Germany and also the Warsaw Pact. So I lived through that tumultuous and great time of ours. It's an inspiration, but then for a Hong Kong-born, Canadian educated young person that I was, aspiring to be a professional software development professional, then I had made a decision not to live under such regime, like the Chinese Communist regime, and not subject my descendants to that kind of government. So I moved myself, immigrated to Canada. Continue to pay. Actually, I even pay more attention to what happened in Canada, 1989, 1990, 1991, 92, 93. The downfall of Brian Mulroney's progressive conservative government in 1993. Paid very close attention. And then we were imposed with the GST. I got to tell you, Colin, at the beginning of my political awareness, I was actually an NDP leaning person. Coming from Hong Kong, the capitalism mecca in the world, I see how public services can actually make a societal change, such as Canada. I aspire for more social justice, like your generation, equality, and a world that is in harmony. So that's when I sort of first started the Roy Romano government was in Saskatchewan back then. Then I started working. Then I started having to pay tax. I was the only income earner to support myself and also my parents, who I brought over from Hong Kong. It was extremely difficult. I realized how much tax Canadian had to pay. Middle class people like myself back then was the one who actually are the silent majority. So my political leanings start changing. I realized that you need to have a government that respects the taxpayers' limited ability and resources. In 1998, 99, I can't remember that federal election. It was the first one I wrote to my the candidate representing my riding, asking if I could volunteer for his campaign. 1998, I think. Adrian Wade was his name, Dr. Adrian Wade, and even today, he and I actually maintained a friendship. But he was a Reform Party candidate, and I was reading up on the Reform Policy Declaration back then, and I like it. I was impressed by what they offered to Canadian, and I liked it. By then, I was already a Canadian citizen. So I offered to volunteer for his campaign in the year 2000. So that must be 1997. Yeah, probably 1997. But anyway, in the year 2000, there was another election. Towards that election, the Conservatives were originally split after 1993 into Reform Party of Canada and also the remnants of Progressive Conservatives. So the two sides have tried very hard to get back together. So I kind of got involved. What back then it's called the United Alternative Movement. It resulted in the dissolving of the Reform Party, forming the Canadian Alliance, and subsequently the Conservative Party of Canada. So I was involved with the grassroots level, discussing about policy declarations, discussing about policy items, debating with people. And in year 2000, I decided to get involved, helping, committing myself to help the candidate representing the Canadian Alliance back then, the election 2000, and he was the MP who I defeated in 2019. His name is Joe Pesky-Salido. So he won. He won in 2000 as a Canadian Alliance MP. Then he crossed the floor to the Liberals. And in 2015 he defeated me as a Conservative candidate, and in 2019 I defeated him as the Conservative member.
So this is your first term as an MP?
Since 2019, yeah. That was a long-winded answer to your question. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. Do you have any advice for young people and teenagers that would like to get involved with politics in their community?
I guess pay attention to what happened to your country. That's how got me involved. And also, start by effecting changes in your own life. Try to make yourself a contributing member to your community first. If you like I drive an EV, I recycle all the items that can be recycled. I even reuse single-use plastic myself to the best I can, minimizing the amount of paper I use. Right? These are things that I continue to do today. So when I as a legislator, I ask Canadian to tighten the belt, to conserve energy, to pay a price on this and that. I start all that from myself first. Okay, I need to put my own house in order. Make sure that I respect my ladies in family, my two daughters, my wife, my mother, and before I actually start demanding, start pointing finger as misogynistic problems in the society. So I always hold myself to account first. I check myself with discriminatory thoughts or leaning. I always question my motive, all that. I think the younger generations today probably we are highly motivated, idealistic, but that's what I would advise them to start from yourself, and then gradually build up on top of that.
Thank you. What do you do most of the time as an MP?
You mean in the normal days?
In the normal days, yeah.
That I have never experienced. I kind of funny, but I was sworn in exactly 1 year ago, and the House of Commons sat only one time before February 2020. So there was only 1 week of sitting, and then it adjourned for Christmas and New Year, and then it resumed, I think, late January 2020. And then, as we all know, pandemic hit us. So what I do daily in this new normal days now is, working with my staff to reach out to communities and Canadians to try myself to talk to them, to understand their needs, to attend House of Commons meetings, like their official meetings, call question periods, and the House actually, in normal days, we sit through Monday through Friday every day. So today, for example, question period happens in the morning, but the House is still sitting right now. If I were not talking to you in this interview, I would, be listening and participating in the debates. Also, I would be working with my staff to keep myself up to date on subjects that are being debated in the House of Commons. Budgets. We never had a budget since early 2019. But so all these research are basically done as a daily routine. Yeah.
What about being an MP do you enjoy the most?
How much time you have. The ability to be able to help my fellow Canadians, it's what I enjoy most. That include, for example, as lower level as to helping a dying father to advocate for his son to allow him to cross the border so that father can actually see his son for the last time. And because of the pandemic, the son was not allowed to be in Canada. And through my advocacy, we were able to provide a waiver for him. I find myself extreme satisfaction in seeing that Canadian lives are changed for the better, because we were able to defend their rights. Few people actually realize that in March early this year, right after the pandemic, the governing Liberals, they were actually trying to propose an unchecked power given to them for the remainder, not just 2020 but 2021, on taxation, on expenditures, that would effectively render Canada into just a single party dictatorship regime. And the Conservative, among joining forces with other oppositions, rejected that clearly. And we were able to change that. And I find that myself playing part of that was extremely satisfying too. That protected not just myself and my fellow Canadians in Steveston-Richmond East, but also people like yourself, Canadians like yourself, the younger generations. As we have seen now, in hindsight, the We Charity scandal, the government has its own hidden agenda. $900 million to a charity that has never helped any experience helping students, no access to French servicing capacity. When Canada, the government of Canada itself already has the Canada Summer Job Program ready to deliver the similar kind of help that they were aspiring to. Anyway, I'm going probably more details than I should, but our rejection of the Liberals, our ability to provide oversight on the government, the checks and balances, was an extreme satisfaction to myself that I was able to stand on guard for thee.
What do you think is the most important issue of our time?
I think there's a trend that's permeating through our younger generation's institutions that talk down on Canada. I mean, Canada, let's face it, it's not a perfect country. today, the Supreme Court judge has just passed down a judgment on a class action lawsuit against the RCMP. So I don't need to highlight how imperfect Canada is. That class action lawsuit was for sexual misconduct in the RCMP. We have the Missing Women, Indigenous Women Commission. We have the Chinese Canadian head tax redress. All these tells us that Canada is not perfect, and yet I'm very concerned and worry that our younger generations are always focusing on these negativities and these flaws of our country, but not look at how great our nation is. We keep holding ourselves in a higher and a higher and higher standard. We need to look at what happened around the world as well, and how far Canada has come to where it is today. I always think that we underappreciate this country that we call home here. It's not a perfect country, but it's actually a very good country that we have, and without appreciating it, our next generations, may not treasure it enough and protect it enough. That's what my concern is, and case in point, when in my generation, the generations of First World War veterans have died off. In your generation, in this current couple decades, the Second World War veterans will be dying off. Do we understand why Canada committed so much in the first and second and also subsequent wars, fighting for freedom, democracy, and human rights? Do we continue to show our appreciation to our veterans? These are historical lessons, and that's what I'm worried. We don't appreciate our nations, our country, the path that we have walked on enough, and so it's up to me to actually pass on that legacy to future generations like yourself.
What's the most difficult part of your job as an MP?
Member of Parliament I would group our job items into three groups. One is legislation. The other one is constituency assistance. And the legislation part, by and large, we're trying very hard. Our country has developed protocols and rules to help us govern this country effectively and fairly. With the pandemic, with Zoom and virtual meetings and all that, we rush into all these and throw away 150 years of wisdom outside. So that there's a challenge there, but I think by and large we are okay in the legislative part of it. Not to mention that we still face difficulty holding the government to account. From a constituency assistant perspective, I think we are okay. Also, people were emailing us, calling us over the phone, and to a lesser extent, even meeting up with myself and advocating for what they worry and concern and care about. Perhaps sometimes virtually and sometimes in person. But it's the third leg that I'm worried about. The third leg is to actually reach out to Canadians to represent the constituency in the community. And I to that end, I try my very best. For in Richmond here, we have an annual Richmond Christmas Fund. It's been for decades. This year, with the pandemic, with the collapse of many of the retail sector, the Richmond Christmas Fund, managed by Richmond Cares, Richmond Gives, they are having a huge challenge in funding. So I, normally we'll go and help sell fundraising tickets and bring donors to them and to support them. But how could you conduct fundraising dinner in this pandemic time? So we had to revert to just basically personal appeal, and so I try to change the way that we work, but still get involved with the community. Um, the other example is our Legion Hall, men and women who dedicated their lives in protecting our countries. This year, even poppy sales becomes almost nearly impossible. So I've been working to find ways to support them and help them. So the three-legged stools are all constrained and impacted by COVID-19 pandemic. But I would argue that it's the community involvement as an MP that is actually hurt it the most. The political figure, it's a human to human role. People expect to see you in the community. People are expected to see you in doing your job, meeting up with your constituents. So it remains a bit of a challenge how I can conduct all three areas of my job virtually.
This is our second to last question. How do you prepare for question period?
How do I prepare for question period? Well, first of all, I have to participate and pay attention. A lot of time, question periods are arranged. At least in the conservative side, we would have a coordinator that would actually he himself is an MP. He would arrange and coordinate the question periods. So I would actually volunteer myself for questions that I want to hold the government to account or ask the government, and I would actually appeal to him to say, hey, I need a slot, I need to ask the questions. But when other times when I'm not speaking, I would actually pay very close attention. I attend each and every question periods that is on the House of Commons.
Do you go to the House of Commons to listen in person, or on Zoom mainly?
Yeah. So since March, the House of Commons had decided to adopt a hybrid sitting model. The hybrid sitting model has MPs attending in person in the chamber of the House of Commons, but I would say probably to just 1/3 of the capacity. So we have 338 members, so about 100 members are sitting in the House of Commons. Probably less. Don't quote me on that number. But the remaining MPs who could not be attending would be, expected to show up on Zoom or via Zoom. On the conservative side, since we have more MPs who wanted to intervene in the House of Commons than over Zoom, we have therefore had to develop a roster system. So I signed up. I wanted to speak in the chamber, and so the Conservative has actually created a schedule for us to show up there. I will be traveling to Ottawa coming Sunday as a result for a 1 week in-person attendance in the House of Commons. The last time I did that was in early October.
Okay.
But otherwise, I would attend through Zoom.
Okay, thank you. And finally, what do you like to do in your free time?
I love watching movies. my favorite movie. Before you ask, it's Matrix trilogy. I love it. After that, Band of Brothers and Pacific are the two TV shows that I love. Of course, Saving Private Ryan. It's also. Other than that, I also love to take my two daughters and wife and my dog to go canoeing. But I have to tell you, Colin, honestly, it's been 3-4 years now since I last have time to do that. So yes, I would love to get out and enjoy the outdoors with my kids more. Yes, they're not kids anymore. Sorry, they're university students. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the interview. Do you have anything else to add before we go?
No, I think I've already spoken a lot. So hopefully you will get your answers. I try to speak as honestly as I can.
We're just happy to be able to do an interview with an MP. Lots of students at our school and across New West are interested in politics, and
Yeah.
our newspaper, they can read our newspaper and also look at our YouTube channel and listen to this.
Yeah, I guess one last point that I would ask them is one, what is the current national debt that Canada assumes on the younger generation's behalf? Secondly, as of today, how much is that? Secondly, as of today's population, how much per person, men, women, elderly, kids, that national debt would mean? So divided by the current population of Canada.
Isn't it about $40,000?
The total is 1.2 trillion divided by 35 million people. So probably 40,000 each. It's a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So in other words, before you go into workforce, before you even finish education, the government has already assumed, use your credit card to borrow $40,000 per head. And if what I said earlier, it's not incentive enough to get the younger generations more excited and involved, the answer to those two questions should be able to get them involved and active.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chiu, for the interview.
All right. Colin, have a good day.
You as well. Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.